In the late 1930s, the cobblestone streets of Correggio, Italy, felt like a world away from the rising political tides of Europe. It was a place where everyone knew your name and your business. At the heart of this close-knit community was Leonarda Cianciulli. To the locals, she was the quintessential Italian matriarch, a warm, slightly eccentric woman who ran a small soap shop. Her neighbors called her Mama Leonarda. She was the woman you went to when you needed a herbal remedy, a cup of strong coffee, or a sympathetic ear. But beneath that veneer of domestic bliss and maternal comfort, Leonarda was a woman drowning in a sea of ancient superstitions and a trauma so deep it had curdled her very soul. Born in 1894, Leonarda's entry into the world was marked by violence and rejection. She was the product of a rape, a child her mother never wanted and openly loathed. Leonarda claimed that her mother had cursed her on her wedding day, screaming that her life would be nothing but a long, slow parade of misery. In the superstitious climate of the early 20th century, this wasn't just a family feud. It was a spiritual death sentence. Leonarda spent her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The curse seemed to manifest in the most tragic way possible. Leonarda endured 17 pregnancies. Out of those 17, 13 children died in infancy. For a woman already predisposed to paranoid delusional disorder, these deaths weren't just medical tragedies. They were evidence of a cosmic vendetta. By the time her 4 surviving children reached adulthood, Leonarda's love for them had morphed into something pathological. She didn't just protect them. She hovered over them like a hawk, convinced that the universe was still hungry for their lives. The breaking point arrived in 1939. World War II was no longer a distant rumor. Benito Mussolini was mobilizing the youth of Italy, and Leonarda's eldest and favorite son, Giuseppe, was called to join the army. To Leonarda, the draft notice was the final fulfillment of her mother's curse. She was convinced that if Giuseppe went to the front lines, he would never return. In her fractured mind, the only way to save her son's life was through a trade. She believed in the ancient, bloody logic of a life for a life. If she could offer the universe a series of sacrifices, perhaps it would spare her boy. This is where the mask of the sweet neighbor began to slip, though no one in Correggio noticed until it was far too late. Leonarda began to identify the silent witnesses of her upcoming work: a heavy carpenter's axe, a massive copper cauldron, and several kilograms of caustic soda. These weren't tools of a trade. They were the instruments of a ritual. Her first target was Faustina Setti, a lonely middle-aged spinster who spent her days pining for a husband. Leonarda, ever the helpful friend, told Faustina that she had used her psychic connections to find her a perfect match in a distant city. Faustina was ecstatic. On the day she was set to leave, she visited Leonarda's home one last time to say goodbye. Leonarda offered her a glass of drugged wine. As the room began to spin for Faustina, the grandmotherly figure she trusted stood over her, the heavy axe glinting in the dim kitchen light. Leonarda didn't see a friend. She saw a bargaining chip for her son's soul. She struck with a precision that belied her age. But it wasn't the murder itself that would eventually freeze the blood of investigators. It was what Leonarda did next with the body. As she dragged the remains toward the large copper vat in the corner of her kitchen, she wasn't just cleaning up a crime scene. She was starting a recipe. And the most horrifying ingredient was yet to be added. Leonarda moved with a chilling efficiency. In her mind, she wasn't dismembering a neighbor. She was conducting a holy alchemy. She took the axe and methodically divided Faustina Setti into 9 distinct pieces. To Leonarda, this wasn't gore. It was inventory. She threw the parts into a massive pot, adding 7 kilograms of caustic soda. This is the stuff of industrial nightmares, a substance so corrosive it can melt through organic tissue until all that remains is a thick, dark, viscous mush. She stirred the vat until Faustina, a woman who had dreamed of finding love in a distant city, dissolved into what Leonarda later described as a thick, dark mush. Once the mixture cooled, she added cologne and grease, transforming the remains into bars of soap. She handed them out to friends and neighbors as gifts, a literal washing away of her sins using the fat of the dead. But it was the blood that held the true power. Leonarda waited for the blood to coagulate in a basin before drying it in the oven. She ground the crimson crystals into a fine powder and mixed it with flour, sugar, chocolate, and milk. She baked crunchy tea cakes, serving them to the ladies who visited her for coffee, and most importantly, to her son, Giuseppe. In her twisted reality, every bite Giuseppe took was a layer of armor against the bullets of the Great War. By 1940, the world was on fire. Mussolini's shadow loomed over Italy, and the draft was a hungry beast. To Leonarda, the survival of her 4 remaining children, the ones who hadn't been claimed by the curse, was the only thing that mattered. If the gods demanded blood to keep Giuseppe safe from the front lines, she would provide it in abundance. The second sacrifice was Francesca Soavi. In September 1940, Leonarda lured her with the promise of a teaching job at a school for girls. The price of the referral was 3,000 lire. Like Faustina before her, Francesca was instructed to write letters to her family, saying she was fine, then to disappear into Leonarda's kitchen. The axe fell again. The pot bubbled. More soap, more cookies, more protection for her son. Yet, the third victim would be the one that truly showcased Leonarda's descent into a grotesque form of vanity. Virginia Cacioppo was a world-class soprano, a woman of grace and fine features. When she entered Leonarda's home in September 1941, she believed she was headed for a prestigious position in Florence. Instead, she became the final ingredient in Leonarda's most successful batch. Leonarda would later boast to investigators that Virginia's flesh was particularly fat and white. When she boiled the singer down with the caustic soda, the resulting soap was of a superior quality, creamy, fragrant, and smooth. Leonarda even remarked that the cakes made from Virginia's blood were the tastiest she had ever produced. She felt a surge of pride, a sense of maternal duty fulfilled. She was the architect of her family's salvation, building their future on a foundation of bone meal and lie. She felt invincible. The curse of her mother seemed to have finally met its match in the copper vat. But Leonarda had forgotten one crucial detail. While she was busy playing God in her kitchen, the outside world was beginning to notice a pattern, specifically a sister-in-law who didn't believe in coincidences. As Leonarda sat in her parlor, basking in the scent of her latest batch of lavender-scented soap, a shadow was falling across her doorstep, one that didn't belong to a victim, but to the law. And the evidence wasn't hidden in a grave. It was being served on a plate. Virginia Cacioppo's sister-in-law was a woman of sharp, relentless instincts. When Virginia vanished, leaving behind only a vague, airy story about a secret job in Florence, the sister-in-law didn't just mourn, she investigated. She knew Virginia had last been seen entering the Cianciulli home, and she wasn't about to let a neighborly smile distract her from the truth. She took her suspicions to the superintendent of police in Reggio Emilia, and the dominoes began to fall with terrifying, clinical speed. When the police finally raided the home at number 11 Via Vittorio Emanuele, they weren't prepared for the unsettling domesticity of the crime scene. There were no blood-splattered walls or chains in the cellar. Instead, there was an abundance of soap. Bars of it, translucent and lavender-scented, sat neatly on the washstands. In the kitchen, tins were filled with the crunchy tea cakes that Leonarda had famously shared with her neighbors. The investigators soon discovered the silent witnesses to the carnage, a stash of jewelry belonging to the missing women hidden in a bureau, and a series of forged letters meant to mislead the families. But the most chilling evidence was found at the bottom of the pots. Forensic analysis of the residue in Leonarda's massive copper vat revealed a grim chemical cocktail: traces of human fat and specific calcium deposits, the calcified remains of bone that the caustic soda hadn't quite managed to vanish. Leonarda remained a steel trap of denial until the investigators turned their gaze toward her son, Giuseppe. The police suspected he was an accomplice. After all, how could a middle-aged woman dispose of bodies with such surgical efficiency alone? The moment they threatened to implicate her eldest son, the very child she was trying to save from the drums of war, the dam finally broke. Leonarda didn't just confess, she performed. With the vanity of a master craftsman, she detailed how she had drugged her friends with wine, dispatched them with an axe, and then turned to the dark art of alchemy. She explained that she wasn't a murderer in the traditional sense, but a mother performing a sacred trade. In her fractured mind, the blood of Faustina, Francesca, and Virginia was a currency. She was paying the universe in souls to keep Giuseppe off the front lines of World War II. She described the process of boiling the flesh into a viscous, dark mush and mixing the dried, powdered blood with flour, sugar, and chocolate to make her signature cookies. She told the investigators, with a chilling lack of remorse, that the cakes were remarkably sweet. The trial in 1946 was a macabre spectacle that gripped all of Italy. Leonarda stood in the dock, unrepentant and sharp-tongued, even going so far as to correct the prosecutor on the technical details of her soap-making process. She was a woman possessed by a maternal shadow so dark it had eclipsed all human empathy. The court found her guilty, sentencing her to 30 years in prison and 3 years in a criminal asylum, a sentence that hauntingly mirrored a prophecy a fortune-teller had once given her decades earlier. Leonarda Cianciulli died in 1970 in the Women's Criminal Asylum at Pozzuoli, passing away from a cerebral hemorrhage. To her final breath, she believed she had successfully broken her mother's curse through her horrific sacrifices. But the shadow she left behind didn't die with her. Today, visitors to the Criminological Museum in Rome can still see the copper vat and the rusted axe. They stand as cold, iron reminders that sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't hiding in the woods or under the bed. They are the ones offering you a handmade cookie and a warm place to sit by the fire. Leonarda didn't just make soap. She turned the human spirit into a household commodity, proving that the bond of a mother can sometimes be a noose.